Thanks for tuning in today, folks. So in today's video, we're going to be doing this neo-traditional female face and snake design here. And because I hate drawing faces, I am going to go ahead and just use a mid-journey prompted face that's been created by AI. Yeah, no, well, yeah. Also, it just makes the video faster, and it's already going to be a 20-minute long video. But, if we want to go over like some stuff about how to do proportions and whatnot, please feel free to comment below. And yeah, we can absolutely do that, because knowing how to do your own face proportions is important. Yeah, I start with a 10% brush size on my inking pen. Yeah, I use the technical pen, but as you'll notice, my lines are a little bit wobbly, and so I end up going over here, clicking on the technical pen, going down to stabilization, and bringing the stabilization back up to 38%. Yep, there we go. And that's just going to make my lines a little bit smoother here. Yep, good enough. And so, yeah. Now, again, this is where it comes to your own artistic style and what choices you're going to make. But, if we're doing tattoo designs, you want to do the minimal amount of lines possible. And as well, you're also going to want to choose which shapes you are outlining that lines up with your specific style. Notice how, again, I am tracing over this piece, but it's really just to get the proportions down and to get the balance of the face, right? So that the eyes are far enough apart, the nose isn't too big or sticking out somewhere, right? So really, it's all just about balance and proportion. Obviously right now, or maybe not obviously, I'm not sure, but I'm making the eyes bigger than they should be. That's a real classic thing to do in all kinds of art styles. Yeah, I end up giving myself the border of the outline of her face in order to make sure that my eyes aren't bugging out too wide, because you can kind of tell in this picture there's not a lot of differentiation between her eyeball and the edge of her eye socket there. And, we want to make sure things are really, really nice and clean in our own designs, and that we don't have little schmutzy things like that. You'll notice I end up actually moving her hairline down a little bit. That's kind of one of those weird things that came out funky with AI there as well. Yeah, it's just little things like that, right? Notice how I'm reproportioning her eye here. And yeah, those are just the considerations that you're going to want to make stylistically for your own piece. And that's why it is good to always stick to good drawing fundamentals and be doing your drawing practices, be practicing how to draw eyes, how to draw noses, how to draw lips, and understanding the muscle structure behind the eye socket, the lips, what a cupid's bow is, and all those sorts of things. They're really, really important, and tracing over art is no substitute for understanding how the human anatomy, or any anatomy, even if it's a tree, right? It's no substitute for understanding reality. Yeah, so even though you see me do this a lot, I'm still always going to recommend that you come at this from a place of understanding, and that you're only using these processes to expedite things and make things easier on you, not as a crutch because you don't know how to do it without it. Yeah, here again, you'll notice that I'm actually balancing the eyebrow a little bit lower because of the way her perspective is on her face, right? And so you're going to need to be able to make those choices on your own. If I had left her eyebrow up there all funky, it would have just made it look like she was giving us the stink eye. Here, I start out by tracing the hair, and then I'm like, wait, what am I doing? That's not what I want at all. This is a neo-traditional piece, and I have a specific way I like to do hair where I kind of create like harder angles on it, and here I am experimenting with it, right? And you'll see, yep, there we are. That's what I'm looking for there, and that's because I've read too many comic books. I draw feet just like Rob Liefeld does, because Image Comics was a huge foundational part of my life, and even if he can't draw feet, he's amazing. And so you're never going to hear me talk too much smack about Rob Liefeld, although if you've ever seen his calves, his shins are pretty bad too. He really, really likes to make them bow-legged. Anyway, that's an aside and doesn't matter. But yeah, go do your actual Rob Liefeld research and see why people yeah, they're not wrong, but I don't throw shade at Rob Liefeld. He was too big a part of my childhood. So anyway, here we are making the hairline better because that's just what we need to do. Adding a little swoopy piece of hair around her neck because I didn't want that big open area of her neck. And while it absolutely is good to have these nice big open areas, you still want to have, I guess, active movement in your piece, right? And it helps with the overall flow. But again, notice how I am going to draw in her necklace jewelry, so I do leave a nice gap and make sure that I don't have overlapping pieces to create confusion in the line work, right? Again, knowing how you like to draw your, in my case, comic book style hair is really important here because I am no longer tracing her hair at all. Oh yeah, so I lose a couple pieces of video every so often in this, and it gets a little bit frustrating. I'm not really sure why I am losing them in the record function on my iPad Pro, but I am. So anyway, now that I'm drawing in the snake, what I did is I grabbed a hard edged airbrush tool, and then that's just to kind of get that snaky proportion so that I've got a nice consistent width for my snake body. Yeah, again, digital tools are amazing, and it's really, really nice to just have that so that you can go back over like I am and trace your thing and make sure that you're not having to balance things out, right? That's why I'm such a big advocate for digital tools, is it can really, really help your process when you know all the little tips and tricks and hacks that you can do with digital, with an iPad or a whatever else tablet they've got nowadays. The technology really has changed a lot, and so yeah, do what's comfortable for you. And so here I'm trying to get his fangs right, and I do decide to add those funny little gum areas to it because it looked too cartoony when I didn't. And yeah, that's kind of sort of something that you need to balance with neo-traditional art, is figuring out how to make things just cartoony enough, but not like Saturday morning cartoony, not like, New Adventures of Gumball or whatever, right? Here, again, you'll see that as I'm drawing my tongue, this is not the way a tongue is drawn at all. I'm using very flame reminiscent rules for getting this tongue in. I'm using the same kinds of curves that I'm using in her hair, where they have these sort of sharper edges, and they're not circular curves. They're very much right angle-y kinds of curves. And me, stylistically, that's just something I like to do. You'll actually see it in a lot of neo-traditional art. Neo-traditional art follows many of the same principles as American traditional, right? Except that you take all of your rules of shading for American traditional, the over-under rules of having black shading butt up against the piece that goes underneath the next piece, having the edge that goes over another piece, have the skin break in it. All of those rules still apply. We're just adding way more detail. We're using smaller line weights, right? And we're using different imagery than you would with a classic, or even different body proportions and stuff like that, right? It's just a lot more realistic looking, while at the same time it uses all of the same craft rules that American traditional does. It's just at a higher detail level, right? And here again, I lost another section of the video. Again, I'm not sure why. Sorry for that, but it doesn't really matter. I don't think it really affects the video that much. Yeah, so now I'm just adding background leaves. That hasn't changed. I was still adding background leaves. The reason I kind of traced those in is because I just wanted to get them proportionally correct. And that is the technique I use, is I'll do a nice line through, draw the little football shape around the leaf, and then I will trace over them again to get what you're seeing now on this branch here as the final leaf style and shape. Yeah, right. Here I go, just refining things down, and yeah, that's how you'll see me do things. I keep everything on separate layers, and this is our final product for how many leaves I decided to stick into the piece. Now I'm going to go through and erase out the snake body parts. Yeah, so I duplicate the layer just in case I don't like it and I want to change anything, because I'm big on version control, as I've said in other videos, and I like to make sure that I'm not committing myself to something and that I can pivot and say, nope, that was a really bad choice. Go through, maybe do some undos, maybe just bring a layer back to life, right? You know, with the check mark there, those kinds of things. Yeah, and so again, digital tools are amazing, and that's what I recommend. As you can see, I just kind of completed the branch there just a little bit because I am now working out where I'm going to be sinking my blacks, and I know that behind that necklace and in that lower part of her neck there, I'm going to go pure black and then fade out from there, right? And so these are considerations you're going to want to make as you're drawing your piece, is how you're going to be finishing it, what colors you're going to be using, where you're going to be sinking your blacks, where you're going to be having your light sources or shaded areas. In neo-traditional, classically, and this is changing a lot as artistry gets better and better in the tattoo industry, but classically you don't really worry about a light source, certainly not in American traditional, but not so much in neo-traditional as well. In neo-traditional, you'll find a lot of really interesting gradients going from, you know, reds to yellows, greens to yellows, purples to pinks, and those gradients are based on what areas you want to draw attention to in your piece, and not so much where a realistic light source would be coming from. And you'll actually see that come to, you know, play into how I design this piece, where when I color mine in, I give all of the tips of my leaves pink, just because it looks good to have the gradient go in that direction. And in no way, shape, or form is that representative of a light source coming from any angle at all in the drawing, right? And yeah, those are just considerations you're going to want to make. Here I'm cleaning up the design. I just got rid of all those layers, and now I'm down to my one line work layer, and then that way I can take that line work layer, grab myself, and okay, I hate the soft blend brush. I always forget this, and you'll see why in a sec here. Forget to grab my reference layer, so click on it, make the layer your reference, go back to your shading layer, and if you need to, if your magic selector, your automatic selector is kind of giving you lip, notice how that threshold bar just popped up at the top of the screen. You can slide your pen up and down along the top of the screen while you have the automatic selection tool on, and that will change the threshold, or how much tolerance of grayscale your that selection tool will have at any given time, right? Yeah, and so here I am using the soft blend going, oh my gosh. And what it does is it actually smears things around, very similar to the smudge tool, and I hate that. When I put in the black, I want it to be black. When I don't want to run over it again and have it lighten it up and smear it around. And so you may love the soft blend tool, play around with your different brushes, play around with the airbrush stuff. I'm not saying it's a bad tool, I just don't like it personally, right? And so here I am messing with the blacks, messing with my shading, figuring out how I want to do it. Obviously, we want to call attention to her face. That's going to be that focal center point of the piece. And then as we back away from that, we want to have less and less, or rather have the piece get darker and darker, right? That's why the leaves are so dark, because they're going to be fading into the background, and we don't want them to draw attention away from the lightest area, which is going to be her face. So now, again, this is why it's important to know your anatomy. I'm just using the freehand tool and a really, really big airbrush. and blending in. So this is one of the few times I will use the smudge tool. I've got the smudge tool, right, that little finger that's all blue right there in the upper right hand corner. I will use the smudge tool for doing certain really soft blends like this, right, where I will use the freehand tool, rope some stuff off, and then take those hard edges and soften them up with the smudge tool. And so that's the technique I'm using right here, is a balance between the freehand tool and the automatic selection tool, and just going through, sinking in, right? Notice how the hair is lighter in that sort of 50% gray tone, right? The leaves are at that black 100% gray tone, and then the face is at maybe like a 10%, maybe only a 5%, right? Yeah, I don't know what those are exact percentages, but you get the general idea. Now, this is a fun technique I just used where I actually take the layer that's black, right, where I'm putting that black smudge in the back of the snake, and you just knock the opacity down, and then you can see through it to make sure that you're not running over old line work, or so that you can see the line work through it. And that allowed me to trace or erase that white outline on the back of his back out super quick and super easy. And so yeah, that's just a fun thing you can do, is click that end there on the layer and then take that opacity slider down for a split second, and yeah, it allows you to see the line work underneath that layer or above that layer, however you've got your piece set up. And yeah, so here we go. Again, I lose another part of this video when I'm doing the color blocking in on this piece. It's not super important because I end up just using the Procreate export time-lapse function, right? And so yeah, it does save my butt there. Thank you, Procreate, for having awesome features. But yeah, notice how I'm not making the snake's head super bright. I kind of want it to not be a focal point. It's definitely something that I want you to see after you see the female face, right? I want her to be the main piece, and then that's also why I'm doing the snake in purple, where it makes it brighter than the dark green leaves. It makes it more noticeable than them, but it does not conflict with the bright orange that I'm going to draw her hair in, and then it does not conflict with the super pale skin tone that we're going to choose for her as well. And so these are all just considerations that you're going to want to have, right? Yep, here we are onto the Procreate time-lapse section. But again, it works out great actually for the tutorial. Yeah, so here you're seeing me put the tips in a pink in the tips of the leaves like I did before. Again, ignoring any idea of light source. I just used like a fat nozzle, I think, spray paint brush to throw in the little splattery background there. And then I'm just using that dropper tool feature where you drag from the upper right hand corner of Procreate and throw in a whole block of color, and then I'm doing that highlights by erasing them out with the airbrush. So if you're curious how I'm doing that, it doesn't get to be shown with the export feature, but yeah, that's what I'm doing here. And then I grab the outermost outline of the reference layer and just throw a nice, semi-pale skin tone in the background there, right? Yeah, so I use the automatic tool, just grab everything on the outside. Yep, it's the fat nozzle spray paint brush that I end up using, and then just spray that background layer in. And the reason I do that is to keep the whites in the eyes and the neck and the highlights there in the snake, all that stuff, so that way those don't come out the same color as her skin tone. Yeah, but that's actually the piece here, folks. There's if you have any questions, do let me know. I'd love to answer your questions here. If you're curious about leading is the spacing in between the top and bottom of your text. Kerning is the spacing in between the actual individual letters. So it's kind of like, longitude, latitude, longitude. Anyway, right? Just double up those layers, change the colors, smear them about, and then boom, you got a fun little effect. But that's the piece. Thanks for watching, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time.